Hello, my name is Damon Friedman, co-founder and president of SOF Missions. As a 20-year veteran within special operations, I've gone through many challenges due to my military service and time in combat. We felt called to start SOF Missions to serve our fellow brothers and sisters in arms, focusing on suicide prevention and resiliency. Our mission at SOF Missions is to empower warriors to find purpose and be resilient. Since 2011, when we started the organization, almost 3 million men and women have deployed to Iraq and Afghanistan. Unfortunately, the scars of war take a toll on their psychological, physical, social, and spiritual health. Many veterans feel a sense of hopelessness and a loss of purpose when they return to civilian life. They feel isolated and alone, unable to reconnect. And in the greatest of tragedies, over 20 veterans lose all hope and take their own lives. Our goal at SOF Missions is to provide veterans the tools and resources so that they don't become a statistic. We offer a unique approach to combating veteran suicide through a whole health, intradisciplinary model. The Be Resilient program is a 4-pillar methodology that addresses the areas of psychological, physical, social, and spiritual wellness. We provide care through 3 delivery methods: medical clinics, retreats, and educational training. Since we started back in 2011, we have been able to reach veterans in all 50 states and have served over 3,000 veterans through the Be Resilient program. Being resilient is a multifaceted and complex issue. We know that to find a lasting solution, we have to address the whole warrior. Many challenges cannot be solved by providing the treatments and modalities of just one component, but by tackling them all. Now, we've expanded our services to include law enforcement and first responders. Together, we can make a lasting impact in the lives of warriors across the nation. To learn more, visit our website at sofmissions.org.
Proceed to your post assignment. All units proceed to your post assignment.
All right. Welcome back.
MisFitNation. The MisFitNation show.
We are a show founded by a veteran and hosted by 2 veterans and a military spouse. Our mission is to get people to tell their stories to the world. If you're an author, share your tips with the Misfit Nation. If you're a musician or an actor, our audience needs to know how they too can get into the business. Coaches, we love our coaches. Come on and share your tips with the Misfit Nation to help them become better versions of themselves. If you are a corporate leader or an entrepreneur, come on and show how you did it and how hard you have fought for success. If you are a veteran, first responder, or Gold Star family, we would love to have you come on and share your story with the Misfit Nation. We always have time for you. If you're feeling down, alone, or starting to see the darkness, stop. Think about those who are around you. You are not alone. You will be missed. If you feel like your problems will be a burden to those in your inner circle or feel embarrassed, dial 988. If you are a veteran, take option 1. We need you to keep pushing forward. Don't make a permanent solution to a temporary problem. If you are a new listener, welcome to the Misfit Nation show. Be sure to subscribe to our show on your favorite podcast app. Also on our YouTube channel at @the_Misfit Nation. Subscribe and click the bell to keep you up to date on our latest episodes and all of our news. You can also find us on Heroes Media Group and About Face Radio. Now, let's get to the show!
All right. Welcome back to the Misfit Nation show, Thursday after dinner edition. Hope everyone's had a great week. The storms that have gone through the Southeast haven't got to you, or maybe you had your own awesome storms where you are in this country. Hopefully you're on the other side of them and you are free and clear. Don't let the noise of the box in front of you get in your head. Live your life and try to clean up your area before worrying about things you can't control. Tonight we have an awesome guest. Also, I mean, she's been through a lot and she's come up on the other side doing great things and sharing her story. She's a genuine and raw speaker that engages her audience, offering a look into her journey through the trauma of losing her murdered LAPD detective father at the age of 17. Her struggles with PTSD and finding courage to speak her truth. Her message of healing and resilience will give hope to those suffering with trauma and grief. She is also the author of The Other Side of the Gun. So without further ado, let's welcome Susan Snow to the Misfit Nation. Welcome, Susan.
Hi there. Thank you for having me.
Oh, it's great to have you here. I'm glad we're able to connect via, the interwebs.
Yes.
And you're still in a place in the country where it's kind of cool. I hope seeing it. You're just south of Denver, but it can't be as hot as it is over here yet. I hope.
It was like 94 today.
Oh, you did do this. You beat us.
Yeah, it's creeping up. So
Way to win up us.
it's dry heat though.
Dry heat. Yes.
We don't have humidity here. So
we'll send that to you in a few weeks. We'll send that. So Susan, I just gave about a 2-sentence introduction of you. If you don't mind, let the Misfit Nation know a little bit more about you, from as far back as you want to go to how we came here on the roller coaster.
Sure, absolutely. Well, I'll just tell you a little bit about myself. I am a trauma resiliency coach. I am also a speaker and, like you said, an author. I have been married to the same man. Well, I've been with the same man for almost 40 years. And I have 3 adult children, which I will not discuss their ages. How I got here is a big story and a long journey, but it all started when I was 17 years old. Like you said, my dad was an LAPD detective. He was actually a robbery homicide detective. And on Halloween morning of 1985, I had spoken to my dad. He was going to court to testify in a case that he was the lead detective on. And our conversation was all about the fact that I wanted to go to a party that night. Being a normal teenager, I was asking him to go, and it was a weeknight, and he was not allowing that to happen. So we had talked about, we'll talk about this later when he got home. The plan was that he was going to go and pick up my 6-year-old brother from school after he left court. And my mom would come home after work. And I was home getting ready for this party because I was bound and determined to go. And my mom was taking her costume off from her parties at work. And the phone rang. And I ran to go get it and picked it up. And it wasn't for me. It was a lady from my brother's school. And all she said was that there was a drive-by shooting and my dad was involved. And my mom had walked into the room. I handed her the phone, and tried to listen into the conversation. But all I had to do was look at her body language to tell me that it was not good. She got off the phone, looked at me and said, "We're going to the school." The school was a church school that was about 7 minutes from my childhood home. So we drove there, and in the way that the school is laid out is there's a parking lot in the middle that you would park at. And the kids, since this was evening time after 5 o'clock, the kids would get out on the back side of the school. So that's where we headed. As we headed there, remember it was nighttime, but the sky was so bright because of all of the police cruisers, and we could see the lights, and there was an ambulance in the middle of the road with its lights on as well. My mom and I both caught my dad's truck from the corner of our eye, so we started to run that way. And the closer we got to the truck, we realized there was glass on the ground. And I rounded the corner. We both rounded the corner, and there he was, partially covered up next to the truck. At that point, my mom kind of collapsed and started to scream. And I froze. And all I could do at that very moment was to hyper fixate on that ambulance. In my mind at that time was a conversation around Why isn't anyone helping him? I don't understand, because I was not comprehending what I was looking at. Pretty quickly, 2 officers grabbed our arms and escorted us back into the school. And we went into an office where my mom was taken aside by some detectives. At that point, I didn't know where my brother was. I didn't know what he saw. I didn't know if he was hurt. I had no information. So I sat down on a chair trying to process everything. And I could hear 2 women talking, and they worked at the school. And the one woman said that my dad was deceased. And that's when it hit me. That's when my world crashed. I wanted to jump up out of that chair and run out of that room as far and as fast as I could go. But my body felt like it was cement and I couldn't move. My mom came in a little bit after that and she said, "I'm sending you with a neighbor." And even though I wanted to jump up and run away, I still was a kid and I felt like I wanted to be with my family unit. I wanted to stay with my brother and I wanted to stay with my mother, but I didn't get that chance. And the night was very chaotic. There was a lot going on. So I don't blame her for doing that. But what happened after that was I was trying to navigate all of this stuff by myself. And I went to the neighbor, and this neighbor, she knew us for years. She knew my parents for years. And just her, as an adult, she was trying to process everything. The entire street was filled with police officers. We could hear the helicopters overhead. And by then, the media had ascended onto our street as well, because it was a big story. And this poor woman had his daughter in her living room, totally inconsolable. And all I wanted at that very moment was my boyfriend that I had only been dating for 3 months. He was 19 at the time. And she called him and she said, "You need to come here." But she didn't tell him anything. She didn't give him all the information. So when he got there, he was in a hurry. And he told me, "Get your purse, let's go. What hospital is he at? Where's your brother? Where's your mother?" The typical questions that you would ask. And I sat there and just stared at him and I could not spit the words out. I just couldn't get it out there. And the more persistent he got about leaving, I finally blurted it out. "He's gone. He's not at a hospital." And I watched my 19-year-old boyfriend sink down and start sobbing. So in that very moment, we were kids. This was the mid-'80s. There was no talk of mental health. There were no resources for kids. And very little known about PTSD. In fact, back then it was called shell shock because it was only attributed to military coming back from war. So that night, I just, I didn't know how to handle all of this. I didn't know how to navigate all of this by myself. Unbeknownst to us, we were targets as well. We just didn't learn that until the trial came about. So that's why we had so much police presence. When I finally went home, there were total strangers in my house. I had no idea who they were. And I didn't want to talk to anybody. I didn't want to answer any questions. I just wanted to hide. And so that's what I did. I went to my room and I just hid in there and prayed that no one would walk in. And I just stayed in there with my boyfriend until he left. I didn't get out of that room. I couldn't pull my head up off the pillow. I heard my brother crying in the middle of the night, so I knew that he was okay physically. And I just, in the morning, all of a sudden it was morning time. I looked out, it was daylight, and there was still police presence everywhere. And I finally got to see my brother at around 11 o'clock in the morning. I was able to hug him and tell him I loved him and that we were going to get through this. And that's when I realized that the last thing that my dad did on this earth was save his life. He told him he saw it coming, and he told my brother to duck down in the truck, and it saved his life.
That's a lot for your brother to have on his chest for the rest of his life,
Absolutely.
knowing that dad did save his life, and
Yeah.
in his last moments, basically, he
Yeah.
saved his life, and his last act of love towards your brother
Yep.
to keep him with you and your mom as well.
Absolutely.
So it showed what your dad was, a true hero of a man.
He sure was. You know, the one thing I talk about a lot about my dad is that he was a very present father. And I hear this from people who worked with him, people he trained, that when you were with him, when you were in his presence, he always made you feel like you were the most important person in that room. And I always felt like I had a safe space with him. I always felt like I was safe with him. And that night, you know, not only did I lose my hero, I lost my safety net. I was thrown into all the things PTSD serves up, which is the severe depression. I did have suicidal ideation, although I didn't know what it was. I didn't know. All I felt was I was totally out of control. I had panic attacks. I was depressed. I couldn't sleep at night. I lived in a fog. And I didn't want to say anything to anybody because I didn't know how to verbalize this stuff. I thought that if I said something to somebody, they would just like throw me in a loony bin and call it a day. So I didn't know what to do with myself. And I just I tell people I feel like I was existing and not living. And it was, I mean, it was just, it took them 6 days to finally catch the men that were involved in my dad's murder. This was a planned out assassination as a retaliation for his testimony. And he was the lead detective. So, no witness, no case kind of thing.
Yeah.
So that police presence that I had in my front and backyard lasted 6 days. And then on top of that, I had plainclothes police officers as bodyguards wherever I went, which going from a normal teenage life to that was a little surreal, to say the least.
I bet it's a life changer for all of you, the whole family. And then, of course, like you said earlier, you were more worried about going to the party that day. That's what you're worried about that day. The next day, now you're worried about everything else that's around you.
Yeah.
It's polar opposite life.
Yeah. And it was, the other side of that was, you know, and it's taken me many, many years to recognize this, but my mother and I did not have a really healthy relationship. And my dad was always the voice of reason, kind of the go-between. And so not only did I lose him, but I also I didn't know how to navigate that situation. And now mentally, I had nothing left. So much so that if you pushed me in a direction and told me to go that direction, that's the direction I would go.
Oh, wow.
And that's why I say I felt like I was existing and not living. Like I just was this shell. And so my mom came to me one day and she said, LAPD, this was about a month after everything calmed down, and they had caught them in and everything just kind of mellowed out a bit. She came to me and said that LAPD wanted to pay for therapy for all three of us. And, you know, being a teenage mind, I thought if you go to a therapist, you're nuts. So, but when she voluntold me that I was going to therapy, that's where I went. And unfortunately, my first experience was not a positive one. The gentleman, in hindsight, I feel was not educated in trauma enough to dip his feet in the weeds, so to speak. He didn't even ask me what that night did to me or how I felt. And I tell people that and they can't believe it. But if you think about someone who is not educated in severe trauma, yeah, he was probably a little intimidated to even ask those questions. So our sessions were very, very shallow. They're just very general. It was all about my relationship with my mom, my brother, my boyfriend, and school. That's it. And every week I saw this man for a year. I kept saying, oh, today's going to be the day. Today's is going to say something. We're going to do something and that I'm going to feel better, you know, and it didn't happen. After a year, he looked at me and he said, Susan, you're a well-rounded young lady and I don't need to see you anymore. You're going to be fine for the rest of your life, was his last words. So I walked out of there going, okay, that's it. I'm crazy. I'm nuts. A professional can't even help me. So I'm going to have to figure out how to navigate all of this by myself. And I did what I thought was the healthiest thing to do, which was not, but I did this, and a lot of people do this. I created what's called an emotional mask. And people would say to me, oh, Susan, you're so brave. Oh, Susan, you're so strong. So those are the words that I created with my emotional mask, and I hid behind it. I was in complete turmoil, fight, flight, or freeze. But I just wore that mask so everyone on the exterior had no idea what was going on inside of me. And, you know, that was the only thing that I felt that I could do at that moment. So I just went on with life. I married the boyfriend. And even that was hard because I felt like both of us were like, well, we dated a certain amount of years. And so this is the next step. So I've got to do this, right? And then you get married and everybody's going, when's the kids coming, right? So we didn't have our first child for 3 years, but we had 2 in Southern California. And there got to a point in my life where I just wanted to distance myself from that part of my life. I wanted to go somewhere where no one knew me, no one knew the story. I wasn't gonna be on the evening news randomly, because for years and years and years, things would come up: parole hearings, anniversaries, all that stuff, and I just didn't want to deal with it. And so I thought if I moved geographically, that I could leave all that behind and start a new life and not have any of this affect me.
Right.
joke was on me, right? So we actually moved to Colorado April of 97 with our 2 small children, ready to start a new life. And I was working as a hairdresser at the time. I worked on April 20th of 1999. I was working that day, and I was doing a client, and I took a break, and I went into the back room, and I turned on our little tiny TV set, and up popped the live coverage of the Columbine shootings. And I watched this coverage, and I had flashbacks. I went back to the night, back to the school. All the feelings that I had when I was 17 came flooding back. I started to panic. I could feel the tingling in my fingers, and I knew it was going to happen. I turned white as a ghost. Now, because I was in another state, I didn't tell any of my colleagues my story. They had no idea. So they're watching me have a visceral reaction and being completely confused. And guess what? So was I, because remember, I was told I was going to be fine for the rest of my life. So I had no idea what was happening to me. None. And my colleague left the room, and I did what I always do. I put that mask back on, and I hid behind it, and I went out, and I finished my day with my clients. Everyone around me was crying, upset, angry. I mean, the gamut of emotions. And I was stoic. Like, this isn't going to affect me. I'm going to feel better tomorrow. You know, I don't have any kids there. Like, this isn't going to affect me. And walked out the door that night, and everything came flooding back. And this time it was scary because it came back harder than before. I felt, I stopped sleeping. I felt out of control. I felt, I was having panic attacks again. I was anxious and on edge all the time. And I had suicidal ideation again. And it was a big fight because part of me just didn't want to feel this way anymore. And I felt like I was in a deep cavern. And the other side of me was, I have 2 babies. I can't leave. So I had this fight in my head. And my husband, being the smart man that he is, recognized this. And he met me at the door one day, and he said, you have 2 choices today. You either go get help, or I'm putting you in a hospital. And by that point, I was so afraid. I was so afraid of what I could do that I put up the white flag. I said, okay, I'll go. I'll make an appointment with a doctor today. I promise. And I did. And I saw a physician, and he put me on antidepressants because that's what they do. And then he handed me a business card, and he said, I want you to make an appointment with this therapist. And I literally laughed in this man's face. I said, right. I tried that 14 years ago, and it didn't work. So what makes you think it's going to work now? And he said, honestly, you don't have a choice. And I said, okay. Well, I had put the white flag up, meaning I was going to move forward with whatever I needed to do. So I made the appointment. And as I got there, I realized that she did specialize in trauma. And in the first 3 minutes of sitting with this woman, I knew it was different. She was asking me the questions that I had begged somebody to ask me years ago. And I felt literally like she was a safe space. I felt like I could be vulnerable with her. And I was able to tell her what had occurred at 17 and what I was currently dealing with. And this lady looked me in the face and she said, Susan, everything you have gone through since you were 17 years old is normal because you have PTSD. And I kind of sat back in my chair and I was looking at her going, what? No, I'm not in the military. I didn't go to war. What are you talking about? And she said, Susan, anyone who goes through any kind of trauma can have PTSD. They can experience PTSD. What you need to understand, though, is PTSD isn't something that just goes away. It's something you learn to manage. And when she said that for the first time since I was 17, I didn't feel crazy. I didn't feel out of control. I had hope.
All right.
And I knew with her telling me this, that she was my person that was going to help me navigate through this and that I was going to be able to heal. And I was so grateful in that moment. So grateful.
It took 14 plus years to get
Yeah.
that to the point. So, and like you said earlier, your first therapist, he wasn't educated enough on one, treatment of you, and two, probably treatment of children with trauma or young people with trauma. You were 17, so and at that time, like he also said, PTSD wasn't a real word to people. Really wasn't thought of.
Right.
In '99, when Columbine happened, that's when I really had my first taste with PTSD. That basically that same week, I had a helicopter crash, and we were in the field. And I came out of the field. That was the only thing on TV was Columbine. So I'll always remember Columbine because I was mad that was on TV and not the soldiers that were in the helicopter crash.
Yeah, I
That was
can
my
imagine.
And
Mhm.
they never said we had PTSD. They just told us to take showers and go back in the field.
Mm.
Even when we came back from Iraq in 2004, they told us we didn't qualify for PTSD. It doesn't happen that quick.
Yeah, it does. Yeah, it does. Yeah, I mean, here's the thing, and this is what I talk about with law enforcement a lot, and I'm sure with the military as well. You are trained to compartmentalize.
Yep.
The problem with compartmentalization is that you can only do it for so long before something slaps you in the face, right? So I've had many conversations with police officers, retired and present, that, and even with my own father, where the talk of mental health in those aspects, especially when my dad was a police officer, if anyone even sought out therapy, they were looked as weak. They were looked at as broken. They were chastised, right? And, oh, you're a wuss. What's wrong with you, kind of thing. And I see it completely different. And when I talk to law enforcement about this, or even military, I've had many conversations with military vets, especially, is, you got to look at it differently. When first of all, you're human, right? We are human beings.
What?
This is a human experience, right? So being a human being, there's only so much the human can take in before things just start going awry, right? And you're walking around with your nervous system all kinds of out of whack. And if you don't find the modalities and the ways to calm that, you're like a walking time bomb, really. So I've had conversations about that, and it's more powerful for you to seek therapy, to seek help. It is a powerful thing to do. It is not a weakness. It's the total opposite. You are taking control over what's going on in your brain and in your body. And in doing that and getting help and working through that, it allows you to not have that pain, that trauma, that whatever it was held over you any longer. And that's powerful. And that allows you to be a better parent, a better spouse, a better partner, a better, doing your job at a higher level.
Definitely. We were, even like you said, the persona that you're weak or you're not part of the team no more if you go to mental health. That was so prevalent in the military until probably around 2012, 13-ish. Then they started coming around. And by the time I retired in 15, it was almost okay to go. And then after that, they started putting mental health professionals along with physical health professionals in the battalion. So you were able to have that whole soldier concept. So body, mind, and spirit, everything was there together, and you're building a human, and a complete human instead of just a machine. And I think things have turned a little better now, thankfully. Thankfully for people looking above us and saying, let's make things happen. So,
Yes.
and too
Yeah.
bad.
And I'm so glad to hear that too.
It just takes so many people, like you said, snapping, or like the movie Falling Down based in LA, but the man who just had enough and just went crazy one day and walked around, going around just getting rid of people because they made him snap. And I think there's a movie out now on Netflix with a woman going through the same thing.
Yeah. Yeah. We can only handle so much before we actually break.
Right.
But you're not broken. You're
Right.
you're a little tattered, but you're not broken, right? I hate when people say, oh, that person's so broken. No, they're just a little tattered. And they can heal from whatever it is that, they're dealing with or not dealing with.
Your book came out, The Other Side of the Gun came out in January of 2023.
Yeah.
And how long did it take you to write it? And what is the, I guess, response been to it as it's been out now just over 2 years?
Well, it took me 4.5 years to write that book.
Wow.
And I wrote it when I was 50. I drew a line in the sand at 50 and I said, you know what? Time's a wasting. I got to get this done. And I felt like my dad was kind of kicking me in the rear end, to be honest. But it took me 4.5 years. And I think the reason it did is because I had to relive and go through all the emotions and, everything that I went through, I had to relive because I really wanted to be as authentic as I could and vulnerable as I could so that people can really understand my journey. I wanted to be able to hold my reader's hand and take them through my journey. So, also at 50, mentally, I was in a strong enough place with enough tools in my tool belt that if I started to feel like I was losing it, I had a tool that I could use to kind of pull myself out of, regulate myself, and, just really get back to a better state of mind. On those
funk, yeah.
Yeah, because even writing the book, there were days where I was a practicing realtor at the time, and I couldn't even work with clients. I was just done. There was nothing left. And those are the days that I had to, and I tell people this all the time, when you have those days, because you'll have good days and bad days, right? When you're in healing, those are the days you give yourself grace. Grace with no guilt. Big one.
Yes.
So when I say grace, that means like you step away and you do something that gives you joy, that makes you feel better, whether that's going for a walk, getting fresh air, sitting in the grass, reading a book, another book, or, whatever, right? Whatever will calm your nervous system, get you back into state, and tomorrow is a different day. So I had to learn the grace thing a lot through the writing. And I wrote the book, and I talk about bulldozing your fear. It was fearful to write a book like that and putting your whole life out there for everyone to see. And I had some reservations and some fears around people I was going to touch on in my book, because having to tell my story, I had to tell the story of others as well. And one of those people was my mother. And because our relationship was kind of hanging in the balance, I thought to myself that, this could either end it or it could open a conversation. So the other person that I was afraid was my husband, because my husband, in 40 years, we have gone through hell and back together. And I was afraid it was going to pull up some wounds for him. And the third was that there were two men that were still incarcerated. And with me putting myself out there again with the story, I still had that little thought of retaliation in the back of my head. And, considering we were once targets, like that was always in the back of my mind. So one day when I started really having these fears come up, I kind of had to sit back and ask myself, what is the true purpose behind this book? Why are you writing it? Not just to tell my side of the story, because everybody had been telling my story for years in their own head. But because a couple of things. There was a lot of anger and sadness in the law enforcement community around my dad's death. And even though it's been almost 40 years, if you talk to somebody who knows the story, it brings some emotions up for them. And so I thought, well, maybe this book they can see my resiliency. They can see that I healed and continue to heal. And then that would help them heal in a sense. And then the more I thought about it, I thought, this is a message for everyone. And that's the message I wanted to get out, that one, you're not alone. And two, there is hope for healing through anything that life throws at you. So every time I had those feelings and I felt that fear, I would just bulldoze forward, just picturing those faceless people out there that needed to hear this message.
That's outstanding. And when it happened in 1985, a lot of people probably were saying, why didn't anyone know about this? Well, 1985, there was no social media. There was no internet. There was nothing that could mass market this as soon as it happened. So it was basically just in LA, and then maybe some of the national news networks might have picked it up, might not have. It might have been a couple weeks later that they picked it up. And maybe at the trial of the 9 people, I believe, that were arrested in involvement with this. But then when you wrote the book, we're full internet heavy, full social media heavy. And all the people that might have been might still be alive, they're probably in their 80s, 70s, or 80s by this time now, that were brothers with your dad, or brothers and sister officers with your dad. Now they're able to see it and see that you have healed. Like you said, you've grown up, you've become successful, and you're still on your healing journey. You're never going to be, but
absolutely.
you're letting others know that there is a way. There's a way out of this. That's awesome, right there.
Yeah, it's I came full circle, not last year, but the year before in September. I was asked to come and speak to the LAPD delegates. And there were delegates from all over every division. And a couple of the gentlemen that asked me to, they were in the Police Protective League, their union. And they asked me to come, and two of those men were on different details within my dad. So they remembered my dad. They remembered the story. They remembered everything. One worked one of the trials, and the other one worked the funeral. So they got it. And then as I was up there and telling this message to the delegates, as I was speaking my story, even the younger delegates that were there that were not on the force when my dad was on the force, they too remembered the story because they used to tell my dad's story in the academy, which I didn't agree with. But yeah, they would tell my story to the new recruits, which I was like, oh man. And so those people were putting two and two together, right? But it was so great to be able to tell this story and, talk about mental health and how important it is, and even my dad's perception of mental health before he passed. And it was huge. It was definitely full circle, and I felt honored being able to go back there and talk to the men and women.
That's amazing. Amazing journey. Amazing the circle that you had to go on to get back to that point. And I'm sure going back to LA after so many years away from there, it kind of brought back the goosebumps and all that stuff. The good memories, Ben, of course, the horrible memories.
Yeah.
There. So it's kudos to you to be able to go there, for one, just to go back there and see all that, and then two, to share your story, your journey with those delegates.
Well, I'll tell you another story. This is where I truly knew that I came full circle. And if this doesn't give your listeners hope, I don't know what does. So I went out there after the book came out for, I had a speaking engagement, and then I also had a book signing. After the book signing, and my husband was with me. After the book signing, we said, let's go to the cemetery and visit my dad. So we did. And as I was sitting there kind of talking to him and telling him all the things that I just did, and, that I continue his legacy, I had a thought pop in my head. Now, years ago, LAPD decided to put placards on the streets where each officer was killed in the line of duty. So there is a placard that's in the front of the school on the main street in front of the school. My dad was killed on the back side of the school. So I looked at my husband and I said, I want to go to the school. And he said, are you sure? And I said, yep, I want to go. Anytime I got anywhere close to that school in the past, I would start going into full panic attack and crying, shaking. I mean, terrible. And he kind of looked at me like, oh, okay. And I said, no, I want to do this. And he said, okay. And so we went to the school and we found the placard, and I was able to stand there and take pictures and look at it. I had no nervousness, no nausea, no anxiousness, nothing. And a little voice in my head said, how far can you take this? So unbeknownst to my husband, I said, I want to go one more place before we leave for the airport. And he was like, okay. And I was driving the rental car. So we got in the car, we drove up the street, we started to turn right on the street that connected the back side of the school to the front side of the school. And my husband's eyes got very big. And he kind of looked at me and said, "What are you doing?" And I said, "Give me a minute." And we went to the street where behind the school, and we made a right to go up the street. We went up the street, turned around, and parked the car in the place where my dad was killed.
Wow.
As I sat there, I was describing to my husband in detail everything I saw that night. And there was not 1 ounce of nervousness, anxiety, nauseousness, nothing. And I looked at him and he looked at me and he said, "Oh my God, we've come full circle." And I said, "Yeah."
Definitely.
So
At the map of the area that's on the Officer Down Memorial page. So I was trying to just picture to drive around for you.
yeah,
Just brings the chills and the violence that happened there, and then you able to go with that full circle moment right back to the spot.
yeah,
You've seen him half covered, and as a 17-year-old young woman, having to see that and not knowing at that point, or not really, I guess, factoring in that he was not with us anymore at that point
right.
until later you heard it. That's
Yeah.
a crazy journey to go right back to that spot.
Yeah, I didn't think I was ever going to be able to go there. I really didn't. And, but, you know, as we were talking about it afterwards, he goes, "My God, that book did more for you than years of therapy, huh?" And I said, "Kind of." I think so. Something happened. But, you know, and that's, you said, this is a journey that's ongoing, right? And I'm always learning different things about myself as I continue to heal through all the things, you know, that still come up. Things still come up. Like I said, PTSD isn't something that just goes away. You just learn to manage it. So when these things come up, these triggers come up, I'm able to pull the tool out that I need out of my toolbox and handle it.
Definitely. We say here all the time that you got to treat mental health like you treat your hairdresser. You won't go to a hairdresser that messes up your hair. You might go to them one time, you find someone else. Mental health is the same way. It's not one size fits all. So that provider has to be someone that you feel comfortable with. Like you said, you found your person.
Yeah. Well, and I talk about that a lot. The one key thing I believe in my gut is that you need to see someone that knows your exact trauma. That is their specialty, because you can't lump trauma into one big ball, right? You can't. Different trauma is different trauma, and different modalities for that trauma as well, right? So I tell people this: your healing is your healing, not the doctor's. So you have every right to interview your therapist.
Right.
Ask them, "Do you work with these kind of patients and this kind of trauma? You know, is this something common that you work with? What are kind of the modalities that you utilize?" Whatever. You have every right and should interview your therapist. And like I said, if you feel like that person is your safe space, that you're able to be vulnerable, because don't get me wrong, like if you're not vulnerable in your therapy sessions, the healing is not going to happen. You got to let it go. And I know that it's hard, and I know that it's scary, and I know that it sucks. I don't candy coat it. I don't tell people, "Oh, it's just going to be so easy." No, it's not. It's probably going to be the hardest thing that you do, but it'll be the one thing that you can do for yourself that will just, when you no longer have that holding over your head anymore, that trauma, that person that hurt you, or that thing that hurt you, when you no longer have that held over your head anymore, the freedom is priceless. And you are able to be whoever you've always wanted to be. And so that's why you have to be vulnerable. That's why you have to just trudge through it. And I tell military, I'm like, for God's sake, if you can get through boot camp, you can learn to be vulnerable with a therapist that's going to help you.
Yes, definitely. That's a good one there. Susan, we blazed through 55 minutes. That went awesome. Learning your story, your journey. It's inspiring. It's amazing, the journey you've been on. And I'm glad to see you're on this side of it. And you're still on the journey like we talked about.
Mm-hmm.
As we ask our guests, as we get to this point, the first question we ask them is, what's the best way for anyone in the audience to get in contact with you if they want to have you on their show or just talk to you?
Yeah. Well, I have a website. I call it my one-stop shop. It's susansnowspeaks.com. And it has information on my speaking. It has information on my coaching. And it also has information on my book. My book is currently on Amazon. It is a paperback form or Kindle form. And coming soon, it will be on audio, on Audible and iTunes.
Awesome. And the website is going across the bottom of the screen right now. I've shared it in the chat a few times during the talk tonight. I'll put it again there now, as well as the URL for the book. The direct link to the book on Amazon has been put on there a few times.
Awesome. Thank you.
So the second question we ask, and this one hits home for the audience and for the Misfit Nation in general. What's 3 things the Misfit Nation can start doing tomorrow to be better humans?
Oh my gosh. Okay. Here we go. 1, like I said, on those days where you're feeling out of place or out of sort, you got to find something to ground yourself. Go take your shoes off, your socks off, and go stand in the grass. I know it sounds crunchy granola, and yes, I am from Colorado, but I'm going to tell you right now, it does do something when you are one with nature. The other thing I'm going to say is, and this is what really the first modality that made such a big difference for me was journaling. And you can do it in different ways. You can journal on paper, you can do it through music, or you can do it through art. However it is that you can get all of the stuff swirling around in your head out, do it. So if you can't sleep at night or whatever, take a pad of paper and a pen right by your bed before you go to bed and just put it all on paper. It doesn't even have to make sense. And the third one is, I think, just know that you're not alone. There are resources out there for you. And if you're feeling out of control, if you're feeling like you're in a dark place, reach out. Absolutely reach out. There are hotlines, text lines that you can call, people that actually care, that will listen. I am one of them. So, yeah, I mean, there's always someone out there for you and that cares.
Outstanding. Thank you, Susan. Those are 3 great ones. I like you said it was the granola way of saying grounding. That was awesome. And I know people here that do it all the time. I had a former boss in our office used to walk around the parade field barefoot just to ground himself.
Yeah.
Started. So I understood what you were saying when you said it. So I'm right there with you. Thanks.
That's good.
Tonight, and thank you for being vulnerable, like you said, and sharing your story with the Misfit Nation is an awesome story. I hope everyone got something out of it and know that there is hope at the end of the tunnel.
Yes, for sure.
Misfit Nation, as Susan just said, if you're going into the darkness, remember, people love you. There's people out there that care about you, no matter how much you think they don't. We do. A day tomorrow with you is better than a day without you. Stay in the light and stay with us. We'll see you Sunday night with Andrew Bragg talking about the Sons of Argandal. Have a good night, everyone, and we'll see you on Sunday. Good night, everybody.
Thanks for checking us out and being a part of the Misfit Nation show. Don't forget to visit our website at themisfitnation.com. That's themisfitnation.com. Check out all our past episodes and get some of the great Misfit Nation gear for you and your family. As always, be humble, stay hungry, and keep hustling because we are
MisFitNation.